So what do you think some of the misconception in our industry about the dental assistants and their role in the practice, if there is any?
I think one of the biggest ones, and we're still fighting it today, even with the staffing shortages that are around and everything else, is that so many people think they grow on trees, or I can go to Taco Bell and hire one in the morning and she can be working in the practice in the afternoon. And, I hear that and I just shake my head because, as you said, the dental assistant is such a key part of the dental practice. And so often, doc, whenever you walk out of the room, a lot of times the patient is going to have questions for him or her, and how they answer those questions could be the difference between that patient accepting treatment or not. So I think that we've got to get past the point where we see a dental assistant as a dispensable or even a disposable part of the team. And just as important as a hygienist, just as important as the office manager, anybody else who works on that team, dental assistant ought to be right there elevated with them.
Yeah, I think that's super, super important. And I think we talked a lot about the role of dental assistant and what they can and cannot do as far as even the office. I mean, today I went to the office and I didn't have my dental assistant. My office manager was assisting me, and I was like, man, oh man, like it's hard to work without my assistant because she knows everything about what I do and how I do it. So they're such a key players in how we do things in our offices.
They are. And where you practice in Arizona versus where I live in Colorado, every state dental assistants do something different. And I think that that's something that we've got to realize as an industry is that not every state gives dental assistants the freedom to impact the bottom line as much as I believe they should. There are states like Minnesota and Washington that are very progressive. And, dental assistants are doing so much with technology and everything else. But then my old home state of Oklahoma and so many other parts of the South, it's very restrictive on what they can do. And so, perfect world, I'd love for a dental assistant who worked in Tucson but wanted to move to Denver, that he or she could do the exact same thing and there wouldn't be any kind of a upgrade or a downgrade in their duties. So I hope that one day, we're going to have something nationwide where dental assistants can move, because we know we're such a nomadic society right now. But that's a key part of what dental assistants are frustrated about right now, is that some of them, if they move with military, if they move for any other reason, a lot of times they may not be able to do the things that they know they're really good at from that other state.
Yeah, that's amazing. Masu, go ahead, please. All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dance Man's. Man, Masud is back. Masud, I miss you, man. You haven't
Come
been
on,
on
man. I've been back for a while. I just missed one. Whenever I'm gone for one episode, they're like, oh, Master's been away for a year.
Hey, man, you're so famous and you're not there. People want you, Masu.
Thank you. Not as much as you, Doc, though.
Nah, don't mention it. Well, today, man, oh man, today we got Mr. Kevin Henry on our podcast. And I am so grateful for Mr. Kevin. I reached out to him on LinkedIn. Such a nice gentleman. Right out the gate, he said, sure, I'll be there. Man, this is what I love about dentistry. It's like you reach out to people and they want to come on and help and support. I love it, man. This is what our industry is about, helping one another, uplifting each other, and letting us make our industry just a little bit better for the future. So, Mr. Kevin, thank you so much for accepting my invite. I really appreciate it.
Hey, not a worry. Glad to be on. Thanks for the invitation. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Kevin is a speaker and he's a champion of dental assistants, which I love. I want to pick your brain about that part because I think it's such an important thing for our
Sure.
industry. Mr. Kevin is also the editor-in-chief for Dr. Bicuspid, which again, I love because I read you guys' news, and you are a baseball nerd, which I love because I don't understand nothing about baseball. So,
all right, I'll teach you anytime you want.
Yeah,
So,
I know. Well, Mr. Kevin, welcome. Thank you so much. I'm going to let you introduce yourself to everyone and we get the ball rolling.
Absolutely. No, I'm very, very blessed. Like you said, dentistry is such a great profession and a great industry. I came into this 25 years ago as the managing editor for dental economics. I came from sports public relations. I knew nothing about dentistry, never worked in a dental practice, but everybody in this industry took me under their wing and said, here's what you need to know. Here's how you talk the lingo. And I've run dental economics, dental products report back when it was in existence, and now Dr. Bicuspid. And like you said, I'm fortunate enough to speak to dental assistants all the way to South Africa and back. So very, very blessed in what I do and love what I do.
Love it. I love it, Mr. Kevin. I think the one thing that I really love about the thing that you're doing is because I believe that our industry, or at least for me as a general dentist, or even the younger doctors that graduate dental school, some of them don't really understand the importance of dental assistant in a practice and how critical their role are for the success of a practice. So what do you think some of the misconception in our industry about the dental assistants and their role in a practice?
She could be working in the practice in the afternoon. And, I hear that and I just shake my head because, as you said, the dental assistant is such a key part of the dental practice. And so often, doc, whenever you walk out of the room, a lot of times the patient is going to have questions for him or her. And how they answer those questions could be the difference between that patient accepting treatment or not. So I think that we've got to get past the point where we see a dental assistant as a dispensable or even a disposable part of the team. And just as important as a hygienist, just as important as the office manager, anybody else who works on that team, dental assistant ought to be right there elevated with them.
Yeah, I think that's super super important, and I think we talked a lot about the role of dental assistant and what they can and cannot do as far as even the office. I mean, today I went to the office and I didn't have my dental assistant. My office manager was assisting me, and I was like, man, oh man, like it's hard to work without my assistant because she knows everything about what I do and how I do it. So they're such a key players in how we do things in our offices.
They are. And where you practice in Arizona versus where I live in Colorado, every state dental assistants do something different. And I think that that's something that we've got to realize as an industry is that not every state gives dental assistants the freedom to impact the bottom line as much as I believe they should. There are states like Minnesota and Washington that are very progressive. And, dental assistants are doing so much with technology and everything else. But then my old home state of Oklahoma and so many other parts of the South, it's very restrictive on what they can do. And so, perfect world, I'd love for a dental assistant who worked in Tucson but wanted to move to Denver that he or she could do the exact same thing and there wouldn't be any kind of a upgrade or a downgrade in their duties. So I hope that one day, we're going to have something nationwide where dental assistants can move because we know we're such a nomadic society right now. But that's a key part of what dental assistants are frustrated about right now is that some of them, if they move with military, if they move for any other reason, a lot of times they may not be able to do the things that they know they're really good at from that other state.
Yeah, that's amazing. Master, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Dr. Milad is the doctor here. He's the dentist. You guys can chat about how it's like to, be with assistants all day. But what I'm mostly interested in when I hop on these podcasts is the story that got you here. How did
Okay.
you start into dental? I just looked on your LinkedIn. You've been founder a couple of times. You're an editor in
Yeah.
chief. So I would say that's quite a journey. It should have been a
Yeah.
roller coaster, guy.
Well, and yeah, I if you'd asked me 30, 35 years ago, or when I was in high school, would you ever be in dentistry? I would have said you're crazy. As I was working in sports public relations in my old hometown of Tulsa, Oklahoma. My daughter at the time was 3 months old when they walked into, it's called the NAIA. It's small college athletics, a lot of great schools out there, a lot of great student athletes. And my job was to go around to USA Today, Sports Illustrated, ESPN, and tell them why that our athletes deserved as much attention as those who went to Stanford or Arizona or University of Washington, anywhere else. But my daughter was young. They walked into my office and said, "We're moving from Tulsa to Kansas City. We want you to come with us, but you're going to have to, obviously move." And I couldn't move my daughter away from her family, my parents, her other grandparents. I just couldn't do that. So we decided to stay in Tulsa and I needed a job. And thank goodness dental economics had a managing editor position open. My master's degree is in journalism. That's my background. I've been a journalist as long as I can remember. And that's what got me here into dentistry. And then just a quick aside, the dental assisting part came in 2005 whenever I knew we had dental economics magazine, we had RDH magazine, but there was nothing for the assistants out there. So I started at the time this crazy thing called an e-newsletter, back when those were very, cutting edge. And it was for dental assistants and it was about empowerment. It was about education. I tried to do things that I thought would speak to the 320,000 dental assistants who are out there in this country right now. And the Oregon Dental Association called me up and said, "Hey, we don't have anybody speaking to assistants. Would you mind flying up to Portland and talking to our group?" And I said, "Sure." And that's been 20 years now that I've been involved with assistants. And as I said earlier, I've spoken in South Africa twice. I've spoken in Canada at the PDC meeting in Vancouver. So I've been fortunate to go all over the world and try to help dental assistants understand just how valuable they are. So yeah, it's been a journey, but it's also one I wouldn't trade. If you asked me to go back and move to Kansas City with that group, I wouldn't do it, knowing what happened.
That's amazing, Kevin. I mean, how did you find out about the gap? Like, I don't think it would be the first thing that you would wake up one day and be like, yeah, today let me help dental assistants. So how did
Yeah.
you come to that?
Well, one of the things that, like I said, I didn't know dentistry whenever I came into this, and my boss at the time said, if you're going to be good at what you do, you need to understand how a dental practice works. So he literally had me go around Tulsa to these various dental practices and shadow and watch what different people in the practice did. So I'd be kind of lurking in the back of the operatory, watching the dentist and the assistant work together. And, as you said, Doc, a few minutes ago, you realize quickly how important the dental assistant is to the entire dance and the practice. And that's what stood out to me more than anything was at the time that, we did so much for other team members, but these people were just kind of like, oh, they're just part of the team. Don't worry about them. Well, we need to worry about them because otherwise they're just going to clock in, clock out and not love what they do, which we need them to.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's amazing, Mr. Kevin. That's amazing. The one thing I wanted to ask you, Mr. Kevin, was
Yeah.
when it comes to dental assistant, and this topic has probably come up many times, as you know. But why do you think that, especially I heard post COVID, why do you think the dental shortage staffing has become such a huge problem for our industry?
Yeah, if you look back at statistics, we were starting to lose dental assistants and dental hygienists even before COVID hit. And one of the big things that happened during COVID that I don't think is really talked about enough is that there were a lot of CODA, accredited dental schools that shut down and never came back. So all these schools where dental assistants were going to learn, all of a sudden they're gone during COVID. And so I always say that it kind of just put the pedal down on us losing team members because we started to have team members that would leave the industry or become hygienists or, whatever it would be that they'd no longer be dental assistants, but there was nobody coming in behind them to be those assistants. And all of a sudden you started to see doctors open up dental assisting schools and things like that. But we've never had that mass that we did before COVID with the CODA accredited schools that no longer are in existence.
Yeah, that's fascinating to hear that. Like, it's kind of like I didn't even think about the dental assisting school shutting down and how the COVID has kind of affected it even before. But even for the hygienists, I feel like some of the hygienists are kind of walking away from the industry as well after like quite of a time. Why do you think the reason for that is? Is it clinical? Is it just, what do you see? What's the pattern in the industry? Is that
I think we're starting to realize just how tough that this industry is on your body. And I think that, there's a lot with ergonomics. There's a lot with people who, and I'm sure you all can relate to this. You get home and you're sore, and you're hurting. And I think that there's a lot of assistants and hygienists, the back office team. Now, this is not front office, but the back office team that's really involved with the clinical side of things. I think that they realize that there are other things that they can be doing for about the same pay grade that don't involve the physical nature that is necessary because don't forget dentistry is not the only one with a staffing shortage. Everybody out there has a staffing shortage. So we have the opportunity now, if we want to walk away from a job, there's likely other ones out there that we can fit into. One of the I remember the night in March of 2020 whenever we knew that dentistry was going to shut down, and we went on Facebook Live and we did a thing for dental assistants talking to them about what are you thinking right now? I mean, just really gauging their temperature. And one of my dearest friends in the industry was a dental assistant at the time in Virginia. And she sent me a text and she said, just so you know, this is my last thing that I'm doing as a dental assistant. And I was like, what's going on? And she said, the more I realize that And again, we learned so much about COVID, but she didn't want to go into a practice that where infections. She was hurting. She was not being treated well. She didn't enjoy the culture. She went to a Starbucks and started working as a barista. And to be honest with you, was making more money than she was as a dental assistant. And I think that's where we've got to realize that if we're truly going to value these team members, we've got to value them not only with our words, but also with pay grades as well. And I think that that's a very important thing for us to remember.
So now that you mentioned it, Kevin, it's funny. We always talk about dentists and the market of dental and where dental clinics are, where the challenges are. But actually, I've never dived deep into dental assistants. And on the side of that, dental hygienists too. But right now, it's the topic of assistants. Where do you see it going in the future? Like right now, like with dentists, one thing that everyone knows is that like we know the challenges that dentists have. They don't know business. The industry is going in a way that's like, more DSOs are taking over specifically because of that. But where do you see dental assistants coming to play within that story?
Yeah, I think the role of dental assistant is changing. I think not only in terms of AI and what's going on with treatment presentation, a lot of times the dental assistant may be doing and showing what a pearl or an overjet may be flashing up there on the screen, but also, there are states that are starting to come up with these. They're called oral preventive assistants, OPAs. And Arizona is one of those states where this is starting to creep up. After a certain amount of training, these OPAs are going to be able to scale and do some of the duties, not all, but some of the duties that a hygienist could. So we're starting to see now these assistants evolve into kind of hygienists in a way in some states, but that's a domino effect of the staffing shortages. We can't find a hygienist, so we'll take this assistant and do this. Well, my question has always been, if we take an assistant and we do this with her, who's doing her job back here then that she left? And I think that that's what we've got to start realizing is we can't just move people in the, around like pawns. We have to make sure that we actually, as we talked about earlier, have people coming into the industry, and we have to realize that we're fighting every other industry for employees. So how do we make dentistry seem like a destination that is worthy of them coming here versus I will tell you, I know assistants who have left to open their own Etsy shops. I know assistants who've gone to be baristas. I know assistants who have gone full time with Uber. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're in competition with unless we really explain how that they can be just as much lifesavers in the practice as the doctor, the hygienist, or anybody else who's in there.
Kim, actually, it's a very interesting fact. When you walk into a business as an employee, you have to make sure that when you are getting paid, you are actually returning that much value back. And I've seen this with many of my friends. Like, they would walk into a new business and it was startup or something. And then after a while, they'll get into problems with like their boss. And their boss is like, I don't want to keep you. I don't even want to pay the salary of your last month. And like, you have to go. But then when they come back to me and they're like, yeah, we did this, we did that. It's like we spent a lot of time. I always tell them, like, it's not about the time that you spend. It's about the impact that you leave there. You have to make yourself a sticky. You have to make yourself in a way that that person wouldn't want to let you go. Like that person would actually be afraid if you go because the business wouldn't be able to operate without you. So what are those metrics and characteristics that would make a dental assistant sticky to a dental clinic? Like, for example, a dental clinic cannot work without a dentist. A dental clinic cannot work without an office manager. So what would be those attributes that the assistant would need to have to make sure no matter what she says or any kind of requirements that she might have in the future, if she wanted to raise or something, she wouldn't end up, becoming an Uber driver. Does that make sense?
It's a great question. Absolutely. And one of the problems that we have in dentistry right now is, again, depending on the state and depending on what the dental assistant can do, there's not a column that shows her production or his production in the practice. And so a lot of times it's hard to value how much ROI that person is bringing back to the practice. So one thing that I always encourage my assistants to do, and I encourage my dentists to do whenever I'm speaking to them, is know what your state legally allows the assistant to do. And there's various ways to do that. The Dental Assisting National Board, danb.org, has a place on their site where you click on meet state requirements and it shows you per state what legally dental assistants can do. And I think once you know that, then you can figure out how to maximize what your dental assistant can do. Now, obviously, that's going to take training. That's going to take the dentist not being a micromanager and being willing to let go of some things sometimes as well. But that's the only way that you're really going to understand the production that the dental assistant can bring in. Now, I'm a firm believer that dental assistant sells cases, closes cases. I believe that with all my heart, but there's not a hard number you put on that. And so I think you've got to look at the other duties that there are, the more hard skill duties that are allowed in each state. And then you can figure out exactly what the dental assistant can do. Because you're right. If a dental assistant walks in and says, I need a raise, how do you say you've earned that or you haven't, outside of attitude? And I think that's where, as a dental practice, you've got to know, what can this dental assistant do? And is he or she really doing as much as is legally allowed?
I mean, the way that it's positioned, from what you just said, like the owner of that dental clinic has to figure out how much value this dental assistant has brought into the clinic. Well, I think the way that it really should be, which would help the dental assistants, they need to have a way to measure their own metrics. Like they need to show their boss, this is how much production I had. This is how much value I brought into your practice. So is it positioned the other way? Because like, as I also work with multiple people like in my startup. And I couldn't care less who did what as long as my company is growing. Like it's an important thing. I need to know who brought this, but because there are just so many things in my head, like I lose count because, especially with a dental clinic, it gets very busy. Like you cannot always remember who brought in how much production. You know what I mean? So how can dental assistants themselves make sure that they can show that value when the time comes up?
Well, and again, a great point, because they've got to take ownership of that. They can't sit back and expect the dentist to say, here's how much you're worth, so here's how much I'm going to pay you. The dental assistant has to make that case for himself or herself. And one of the things that I always suggest to my dental assistants is that they need to meet with their dentist at least twice a year. And it's not a salary discussion. It's not I've worked here for so long, I need a raise. It's none of that. It is literally, here's our to-do list for 6 months to grow you into a role in the practice that I see. And here's the steps that we're both going to do together to get you to this level. And that's the kind of communication that you need. And the reason I always say twice a year is because that first part of the year, when you say, this is our goal for the year, this is what I want you to do, this, and the dental assistant as well should come in and say, this is what I want to do. Then they need to meet on June 30th or July 1st or whatever it is when the second half of the year starts and say, did we reach our objectives? And if not, why? And if we did, great, here's more to do. Or if we didn't, we need to get on this by the end of the year. And so I think it's really important that the dental assistant doesn't just sit back and say, what do you want me to do? They need to come in saying, I know what the rules are in my state. We don't do anything with this, and I'd love to learn. Will you work with me on that? And that's whenever you realize you've not only got an invested team member emotionally, but also one that is worth the price maybe that you're paying him or her as well.
And I think that's exactly, Doctor, one last thing I was going to say. I
Go
think
ahead,
that's
please.
exactly the case because you know that within the like dental market and industry, one thing that everyone talks about is the staffing issue. And one thing that we realized along these podcasts, actually, I don't know which guest we brought on that we came to this conclusion. It's really not the staffing issue. It's more of a leadership issue that dentists are not the best leaders. No offense, doctor. They're not the best leaders and they don't know how to manage teams. Like so many of the times something might come up and it's always on the employees, it's always on the staff. It's never on the boss, the dentist. And you would blame it still on them. And so many of the time it's really about your management, how you manage that team. How did you assign them to do the things they have to do? If something is not working out, was it really on you as the leader or was it really on the staff? So I think that's a huge thing. And I think one thing that's based on the conversation that we just had, one thing that assistants need to know is to choose the right team. Because if they choose the wrong one, no matter how good they are and how they communicate, I think they're always going to end up missing something or failing somewhere.
I just had a dental assistant on my Dental Assistant Nation podcast a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that she said is that she gives every practice about a month. And if all of a sudden the things that were said during the interview process don't come to life, or she feels like it was a bait and switch, or she feels like the toxic culture was kept over here and all of a sudden they can't hide it anymore, she leaves. And it's not because she doesn't love what she does, but she leaves because she realizes I'm never going to fit into this, and I don't want to lower my standards to it either. So I think you're spot on. I think it's about hiring the right person, but also knowing what kind of person you want to have in that position as well. And I think that that's vitally important today because you're right. The assistants will walk out and they'll find somewhere else to work.
So, Mr. Kevin, from a perspective of a dentist, because Masood just mentioned, right? We talk about this with Masood even ever since last year when me and Masood kind of met and we discussed about building dentment and wanting to know. We know dental school don't teach you business stuff. Dental school doesn't talk to you about leadership. Dental school doesn't do any of that. So, from your point of view, what do you see? What's the issue or the disconnect that you see between the dentist and the dental assistants, and what advice would you give to a dentist to improve that relationship between the dentist and the dental assistant?
Well, I will tell you, one of the things that I have seen for years has been that anytime we talk about leadership or culture or any of those words, the eyes start rolling back in the head sometimes. It's like I didn't go to school to learn how to be a leader. I went to, cut hard to soft tissue. This is what I want to do is this. And that's not the world we live in anymore. You have to be a leader. You have to be a boss, for lack of a better term. And I think one of the things that dentists need to understand is that if that's not something you're comfortable with, it's actually okay to admit that. But tell your team that so that they don't think you're just being a jerk and standing off. Say, this isn't my strength. So how can we work on this together to build what you all and I want in this practice together? Now, granted, that's admitting that you've got a little bit of a weakness. And I think that that's the problem as well, is that if you really want your business to be where you want it to as a dentist, then you've also got to see your shortcomings and you've got to see how can these people help fill in those shortcomings so that we can reach a goal that all of us want. So I think it's all about communication. I think it's all about being open. I think it's about being transparent. And I think it's as important, well, I should say it's more important now than ever because we're starting to see this shift where team members understand they don't have to stay. You know, it's not like that they're locked into somewhere. And I think that that's a scary reality for a lot of dentists, but it's also one that's going to force them to change a little bit, I think, as well.
I think one of the best relationships that I've seen between a dentist and his assistant is actually Dr. Milot's, because every weekend I call him, he's in Mexico with his dental assistant.
Not bad. That works. Hey. Yeah, it's really about what type of practice do you want to have, and are you really willing to tell your team members that and have them share in it with you? Now, when you reach those goals, yeah, how do you share that with the team? I think that's a really important topic to think about as well. Is that you can't just say we made it, high five, and then start January 1 over again without them going, I got to the goal. Where's the carrot? Where, how do we share in this together?
Yeah, that's such an important thing. And the one thing that I always talk about this too, and I think other dentists that we brought on kind of mentioned it as well. I think the other problem is, and I say this as a dentist, I'm not trying to disrespect others, but the one thing also is I believe that the dentists have this ego of their in their head. And then sometimes that ego can also get into the
Sure.
way of how we do business, how we do things, how we treat others. Sometimes I think that's an issue as well that we have to be able to address and be able to kind of figure out what needs to be done.
Hey, and let me just say real quick, we've all got ego, and that includes
Yes,
the dental assistants too. So I want to make sure people understand, I don't think they're all perfect. Okay.
yes,
There's issues on that side of things as well. So don't think, Doc, that you've got to always be the one to change to match the dental assistant, because a lot of times he or she has to do some morphing as well to fit into the culture that needs to include everybody.
absolutely. The one thing that, Mr. Kevin, the one thing that has been such a fascinating for me ever since we started this podcast, and Masu can probably uh say this as well, is like a lot of time the conversation has been about around culture and the mission of a practice. And the one thing I have seen in a lot of dental practices, even like friend of mine that has a dental practice, I don't think that they necessarily understand what the culture of their business is, or how to build the culture for their business, or how to put that
Yeah.
together. So you have many years of experiences and you have worked with a lot of practices. For a dental practice to be successful and truly provide their assistants, their team, with all the tools and everything for them to be successful, how do you build that right culture and put the right people in that culture? How do you do that?
Well, I think it has to start with the doctor. And I think he or she has to have a vision for what they want their practice slash business to be. Now, if you're going to be a business that you want to leave at 5 o'clock every day and like literally walk out the door, not at 5:30, not at 6, but at 5 o'clock, then that's something you've got to communicate during the hiring process and then keep up with as that team member comes on and grows in the practice. So I think it's all about sharing your vision for where you want it to go. And then again, don't be afraid to talk about that during the hiring process. Excuse me. Or if people are already there, say, this is something we didn't do a good job of last year. We've got to change it this year. How do we come together and make this work? But again, it's the dentist setting the pace. It's the dentist with the vision because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's his or her business, and everybody else should share in the rewards of that business. But ultimately, they went to school, they did all the things to earn that right. And so they should be the ones setting the culture, even though that's something they're not taught in dental school at all.
No, that absolutely makes sense. Yeah, these are the type of thing that we definitely don't talk about in dental school. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, was because these are the type of conversation that is going to help the younger dentists, even the dentists that are out there, to really understand their position in the industry. Because a lot of time they don't really know what their position is. A lot of time there is a disconnect in our industry between the dentists. And sometimes they don't know what they want to do. Like you mentioned, sometimes we don't even set the culture or our vision correctly, and our business as a result of it can struggle a little bit too with that. Well, where do you with the AI, because that's became such a big topic? Where do you see with the AI? How do you think that's going to transform? Is it going to make the dental assistant job easier? Is it going to take some of that pressure off of them? Is it going to help them to improve the care to the patient? How do you see AI with dental assistant?
I see dental assistants being helped by AI, but I also want to have the caveat that they're going to need to understand how to have it help them. So, a really good example is the treatment software and a lot of things that can be done to really explain to the patient what the procedure is going to be and why they should accept it. A lot of times the dental assistant may have struggled with the images or whatever it might be and really trying to explain the crack in the tooth. There's no question about it if you've got this AI now and it's functioning properly. So I think it aids in a lot of things. I don't think AI is ever going to replace the dental assistant. I still think you need that human touch. I still think you need that dance going across the patient with the instruments and everything else. But I think it's after the treatment ends where you've got the notes, you've got the follow-up, you've got the treatment plan presentation. Those are the areas where I think AI is really going to help so much. But you can't just hand it to the dental assistant and say, go get them. There has to be training involved. There has to be, if you're going to invest in AI, how do you maximize the ROI from that and make sure that the dental assistant knows every bell and whistle that there is in there? My wife is a software trainer. And one of the things that I'm constantly amazed by is how little of dental software is used in the practice. Usually that's such a big expense for the doc. And so it's really about training. It's about making sure that you get the most out of that technology. And I think the same thing holds true with AI.
In this age, especially because you mentioned AI, which parts of AI do you think, because AI is not going to replace anyone, like maybe in the next 20, 30 years, the rudimentary job like customer service and the jobs that are mostly repetitive, they would be replaced by AI, but I don't think anything else that's required of skill would really be replaced. But which areas do you think the AI is really gonna out the assistants, and then what areas do they have to learn about it? Because AI is not just something that you would grab on today and start using it. You need to get onboarded on it, especially when it comes to clinical terms. Like you need to know
Absolutely.
how to use it better. So which areas do you think dental assistants should right now look into and start learning about it?
Well, I think the insurance side of things, first of all, I think being able to explain the benefits to the patient if there are questions. I know a lot of people view that as a front office duty, but I also know there's so many cross-trained dental assistants out there. They need to have some knowledge of insurance and benefits and be able to explain that very well, because we know patients walk in and they don't know. So having that AI be able to make the call, having that AI be able to do the research and say, yeah, Mrs. Jones, here's your deductible, here's what this means, all this stuff. I think that's number one. And I think number two, it comes down to the whole side of the scanning, the whole side of the treatment presentation, as we discussed. I think that those two kind of bookends where the patient walks in and knows what he or she gets from insurance, if you take the insurance, as well as toward the end, the patient knows what's needed to be done, which ties back into, does insurance cover that, which is always the question. I think if you train your assistants to have those two bookends in between her being a great, or him being a great clinical, knowledge, very knowledgeable with clinical while they're sitting there with the patient, I think those two things would make a world of difference when it comes to AI.
And because you're a journalist, one last question I have, Kevin. Maybe this one would be a tricky question. You've seen like in all the journals and like YouTube videos, usually when they try to like describe a job or something, like the title is like, why shouldn't you become, like in our case, a dental assistant in 2025 anymore? Or something like that. Why is the reason that somebody shouldn't look into being a dental assistant anymore?
Why should they not be a dental assistant anymore?
Yes.
I think, boy, wow, that goes against that goes against what I love.
Exactly.
I'll play the villain here. I'll do that. This is my village and origin story here. I think if you were to not be a dental assistant in 25, I think it's because there's a lack of respect still for dental assistants. And I think that if you aren't self-sufficient enough to say, I'm important, I matter, then it's going to be really hard for you in a lot of dental practices. You're going to be seen as a spit sucker. And I hate to say that, but I've heard dental assistants called that. And I think that that's all that people are going to see you as. So I always encourage my assistants, go in there, and if you don't believe in yourself, who else is going to? And really have that self-fulfilling prophecy inside themselves. But I know that that's hard in a lot of practices out there. I know, as much as we talk about culture and everything else, it's definitely not the majority of practices, I believe.
Amazing. So
Well, Mr. Kevin, the one thing is, like, you've been talking for the past 38 minutes, and I'm keep trying to remember. I'm like, man, Mr. Kevin has that radio voice. You know what? Right?
he
You're
does.
exactly. Yes. I'm like, you got that. You got that, like Sunday night football announcer voice, man.
Man, there you go. I'll tell my wife I need another job. She'll love that. So, yeah. No, I mean, I love to do podcasts like this. I love to have conversations, and I think conversations are important. I mean, I think we've
Absolutely.
got to learn from each other. So yeah, it's been great to be on. I really appreciate it. I do.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Kevin. Well,
Thank you,
Mr.
Kevin.
Kevin, I know it's Friday night. We don't want to hold you up any longer. Truly, truly, I appreciate the fact that you took the time for, we haven't met before this podcast, and we met, and, me and Masud can add another friend to the list of the friends that we have made.
Absolutely.
I truly appreciate it. I hope that we get to work with it together soon and do other things and do great things for our industry. So, Mr. Kevin, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on, and thanks. Anybody that talks about dental assistants is a friend of mine. So thank you both for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Kevin.
you, Kevin. Thank you for coming on. Appreciate you. Take care.